right now. So just be aware that, looks like it's working on my end. And Jay, why'd you turn your camera off? Anyhow, let me, so you all know I'm Gailey Wamasa. I am currently the chair of Division 18 VA section, who is sponsoring this webinar. I think we have a fantastic program today. Going to just real quickly introduce you to our panelists and our facilitator. So I'll start with Dr. Cohen, since he is being bold and on screen, actually, because Jay, your video is actually working today. So Dr. Jay Cohen, he is the Chief of Staff in the Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention in VA Central Office, and has actually had lots of experience in terms of mentoring, dealing with human resources, as well as professional development and leadership development. And so his wisdom will be very, very helpful today. And then also one of my most wonderful friends, we've been psychologists together since back when we were babies. Dr. Christopher Watson is the Assistant Chief of Staff for Behavioral Health at the Pittsburgh VA. And Dr. Watson has been engaged in numerous leadership positions and has conducted mentoring all across his professional lifespan, and has recently been involved with OMHSP's mental health hiring initiative, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And so really a dynamic duo that you have here. And then we have the amazing Dr. Charlotte McCloskey, who is Division 18 VA Section's Mid-Career Psychologist representative, who has been doing a great job with monthly meetings to support mid-career psychologists. And we thought, what a better way than to do a webinar where we could sort of do an Ask the Expert for their inputs, ideas, and suggestions. So Dr. McCloskey will be facilitating. I will mainly be monitoring the chat. I know, Dr. McCloskey, you had already generated a number of questions for our two expert panelists, but that we also agreed that if you do have questions from the audience, I might periodically interrupt and ask those questions. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. McCloskey.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this opportunity today. I do apologize again for not having my picture up for you all today. Just, you know, as this, it's fun kind of learning all of the new technology that we need to do. So again, just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for both hosting this and then also being presenters today. Also wanted to give just a tiny bit of background before we go into our questions, a little bit about why this is even happening. One of the things that started, and this started before me, there was a group of mid-career psychologists, and this came out of Division 18's VA section, that just said, hey, you know, we really don't have a whole lot of support for mid-career psychologists. And, you know, one of the things is that I know that some people who may not be with us today on the live webinar, we want you to know that we have efforts underway to support and highlight the needs of mid-career VA psychologists. And the definition of mid-career is typically 10 years post-graduation, but honestly, we let the psychologists decide when they have hit mid-career. We are part of Division 18 VA section, as well as we have some members that are from AVAPL. We welcome everyone, and we do have a monthly meeting, and anyone is welcome to join. This particular topic that we're going to be talking about today is one that was discussed in a previous meeting, but not with these two particular speakers, but we knew that this topic is something that we need more than one discussion to even start to scrape the surface. As we know, as psychologists, we are in a very dynamic profession with individuals who are also very dynamic. We are scholar or scientist practitioners, at least those of us who are clinical or counseling psychologists, and we often come with incredible skill sets that can be utilized in non-traditional ways to the benefit of the VA, but also to the professional. Unfortunately, not much attention is paid to mid-career, either in career literature or in organizations. But what I can tell you is that mid-career is a time when we make big decisions that guide our path. So this is really a great conversation to have today. I will say that I see our mid-career psychologists as a great asset to our profession, but then also to the VA. So I really do appreciate the time to be able to kind of explore some questions that were actually generated by mid-career psychologists to our panelists today. And it's going to be kind of highlighting both recruiting and retaining, but then also to hopefully questions that will also highlight and encourage some of the mid-career psychologists who may listen to this webinar either right now or in the future for thinking about steps that you can take going forward. But with that, and with either one of these questions or with any of the questions I asked both Dr. Watson and Dr. Cohen if you'd be willing to just kind of give your expertise and wisdom in these areas. And hopefully we'll get through all the questions that we have, but as Gail was saying before, please also, if you have questions, please send those through the chat and we will get to those. Okay, so for the first question, what incentives might be available that are underutilized to help with retention for VA mid-career psychologists?
That's a great question.
Yeah, take it away.
Oh, sorry, Jay. And I apologize for not having my camera capabilities as Jay does. So we will get through this together. So I think that's a great question about incentives. And incentives are always very, very interesting because there is, unfortunately, some local variance as to when those get utilized. But as we are in a pandemic, certainly one of them is just virtual work and flex schedules, as well as alternative tours. These are things that you have to sort of ask about. Sometimes you have to negotiate, but I think it's certainly important to ask about that up front. Whether people can work off-site. For some people, if you can do extended tours, where you may work 4 days a week for 10 hours. These are things to certainly put on the table, and you can't have anything that you don't ask for, as they say. So always ask, even if the answer is no. So that's one place to start off with in terms of looking at that as a potential incentive. Also, even though it needs to be in the announcement, ask about any relocation support that you can get. I think anything that you can get is helpful. It's nice when it's in the announcement. Sometimes for qualified, highly sought after applicants, there can be changes that are made, but those are a few things that come to my attention. What are your thoughts, Jay?
Thank you, Chris. I really like how you kicked it off by talking about quality of life and work-life balance incentives rather than financial ones. I think that everyone in our community and on the call today would acknowledge that we didn't come to VA for the money. And so usually what incentivizes us is not money. But that being said, there, like you said, there are opportunities for some incentives. I'll preface my remarks by saying these are more just observations I made along the way, not speaking on behalf of Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, nor for Department of Veterans Affairs. But I would say that mid-career person is in a good place where you're settled in, you know the ropes, you know your job, you're comfortable in your own skin, and I would say become an HR expert. Very often, I would be told if I'd ask a question, well, there's a policy that says you can't, or there's a policy that says you can, and say, well, show me the policy. And so I encourage folks on the call to really get to know your local HR, get to know the qual standards inside and out, get to know the retention incentives that are available. There are retention incentives that are available for hard to recruit positions. If somebody is in for a frontline person, maybe it's a little harder, and I don't know how to address this, but if someone's in a program management or in some leadership position and is considering leaving, there are retention incentives that can be used to encourage them to stay. So, but I would, Chris, agree with you that changing the tour of duty, looking at opportunities to telework, making your life work for you can sometimes be all the difference in the world. And there are flexibilities, and VA is trying to promote those. And so there are opportunities for those as well.
Thank you. Actually, even though I know that I'm here to kind of facilitate the conversation, I'm making notes myself, and I really like the idea of that HR expert, because that is so true. So thank you.
And one more thing to add in, as well as knowing your HR and knowing your qual standards and all those pieces, do what you can to do your research and know the facility or the area where you're going. Not only knowing the supervisors there, but knowing other people, other psychologists who are working there. Sometimes they can help you understand the lay of the land, and they might have certain extra bits of information that could be helpful for you in the negotiation process. So that's good to know. Of course, now you have Jay's name, my name, Gail's name, Charlotte. It's good to know other people in VA psychology who might be able to give you just some ideas and some other tips, or help you better understand some of the local issues that are at the facility that you're working with.
I appreciate that a very supportive statement, Dr. Watson, because I think that one of the things that happens is that often working in and within the VA, sometimes we might get told something by one person, but then I really appreciated, Dr. Cohen, you also kind of talking about being that HR expert, because sometimes that may not necessarily always be the case, or maybe we find a new pathway to kind of understand how we might be able to do that. So actually that kind of goes really well into the next question. And this, sometimes is based on, again, local, but I know that there are some things that are kind of written about this. But this has a little bit to do with kind of pay structure, just how to advocate for step and grade increases for mid-career psychologists.
Well, Chris, I'll start with this one, and then love to hear your thoughts on it as well. Well, again, let me start by saying it's really important to know the qual standards inside and out. They've changed a couple of years ago. There were some dramatic changes to them. They've gotten tweaked since then, but those were more tweaks than dramatic changes. So really know the qual standards, know what it says, are what's expected of the full performance level for a psychologist, which is GS-13, and what are the different options for GS-14s and GS-15s. I know that a lot of mid-career psychologists have raised the question of the social work qual standards have this concept of the senior social worker, which is one grade above the full performance level. Psychologists do not have that concept. It's all about the scope and complexity of the position, and so that doesn't exist. Step increases, as everyone knows, are based on seniority. As you go through the ranks, you get a bump, and then you got to wait a couple of years, then a bump, et cetera. But there are SAAs, special awards for achievement, and also for performance. There are specific guidelines on these, and they are actually much clearer than they used to be. So it's a little bit less mysterious. However, these are all technically, they all fall into the concept of bonus monies and the pot of monies that are available to a facility. So at the end of the day, it's up to a facility medical center director, whether he or she feels that the budget can handle it, and then do you deserve it based on meeting those standards. And so there's a couple of things that I would encourage people to do is one, really know the qual standards for grades. It's not so simple to get a grade increase. I have other thoughts about that have to do with competing for positions, but I'll hold off on that for a minute. But regarding steps, there are specific guidelines for step increases, but then know what the culture is at your facility and think about when you advocate for yourself and know, hey, I've done X, Y, Z, I meet the criteria. And I'll get back to this again, it'll be a recurring theme in Jay's comments. When I'm change management 101 or trying to get somebody to buy into something I'm selling is they're going to ask what's in it for me. So I'm asking them to do something for me personally. How does it benefit them or the organization to do the right thing? And so be thinking about not just, hey, I deserve this, I've earned it, but also how does it benefit the organization to find the monies in their pot or to prioritize me. So I'll pause there. Chris, please add your thoughts.
I love your comments, Jay, and you are my spirit animal in terms of how you delivered that, and I'll tell you why. I really think it's important to not just talk about why you deserve it, but as Jay mentioned, how is this going to help the next person? How is this going to help a supervisor in that area? So for an example, maybe talking about a specific subject area that's not on what I would call the generalist continuum. It's more of a specialty service that you provide, how getting this increase, you're going to be able to offer some additional things, and maybe you might even be able to help access in some way. Those are types of things that as a supervisor, that's my language. I want to hear that. And then I can really get behind really defending your case. Usually, as Jay mentioned, it is going to go up to higher leadership, but they're going to come back down to the leaders in that area and section and service line and say, okay, what do you think? And why should we do this? And that's where you want to talk about really what's in it for them. So there are lots of ways that you can articulate that, even in terms of, I know it happens a lot with the ABEP process that people will say, well, we're not sure if that really merits a step increase. Well, beyond just that you've gotten this advanced, sort of certification, what can you do with it becomes the question. And how is that marketable and a reason for them to advocate for your step increase? Where in other situations, they might say, well, no, we don't really want to do that. That's just something you should have done anyway. So negotiate, negotiate, negotiate.
All right, thank you both so much for that. And again, yeah, just knowing those qual standards, and yeah, so many changes with those, and really important for us to know. That might be something that would make sense for us to somehow get that out to our membership again, just in case people don't have that. Okay, so there's a saying that I learned when I came to the VA. Now it's been 12 years ago. When I came to the VA, I was told, once you know one VA, you know one VA. And I'd say that that's very true. And I think that's really true in a lot of really good ways, going back to that dynamic nature. However, because sometimes we're not as cohesive as we'd like to be. And if we're not maybe involved in things like these national organizations or these opportunities like we're taking today. So again, thank you both so much. Thank you all three so much for this. How would you give advice or give, encourage people to kind of find out about some opportunities, maybe on the VISN or on the national level? I know sometimes we can find the job opportunities through USA Jobs, but kind of on that VISN or national level, love to hear from both of you about ways that we could be looking for those.
Want to start off, Jay? You want me to start off?
Oh, I figured you had the baton and you were just going to hold on to it, Chris. Okay, I'll go next. Take it away.
Okay. So the big thing about leadership opportunities that are not formal supervisory positions, It's making sure that you understand what's important to the organization as a larger organization, but also locally. So, for example, if a big issue is on patient flow and there's some problems that you're having, it's hitting your quality sale metrics, and that's something that's really, really big that they're looking at your facility. Well, then volunteer to head up a team to look at ways to improve that and say, I can, if you give me some time, I can involve a few of the key players and work on this project, have a timeline for it, and get back with you. So that's it's communicating to others that you're a go-getter and that you have some initiative. And B, it's letting people know that you understand what's important to the organization and you want to, again, put yourself out there to do additional assignments to move things along. So that's one thing that you can do. You can do that both at your local level. If there is a vision committee or even a national committee that's doing some work and you hear about it and you like to participate, make your connections, then ask your leadership and say, I think this will help in this way, and I can sort of assist your efforts, both locally, being on this vision committee or national committee. So you really want to make sure that you do your networking and always ask what's important. We have network directors performance plan that unfortunately usually gets communicated around this time of the year, although it's really retroactive to the start of the fiscal year. Make sure that you know what that is and know what the key elements are, where you are as a facility, and ask those questions so that you can then pick projects that might really be of interest to others. So get to know your leaders, get to know the high visibility areas, and then suggest ways that you can help move things along to improve areas that you identify.
Chris, I love, well, can I say you're my spirit animal? or is that not original enough? But I really love the things that you shared there. And I don't have a ton to add, but I see that there's a question in the chat too, which I want to get to. If you listen in on national calls, and so I think start local, exactly the way you described it. There are way too many demands on local leadership, whether it's within mental health or the facility at large, quality, et cetera. There's just too many demands for people to be able to meet. And if you see an opportunity to step up and take on something, people will be grateful. And if you are able to actually make a difference, then people will notice. So that's number one. Number two is at a regional or national level, same thing. If you're part of a community of practice, pay attention to the emails that go out on the national email groups. Listen between the lines on the national calls. Sometimes you'll hear someone say, hey, Chief so-and-so at facility X retired. Well, okay, don't wait for them to post the position and think maybe I'll apply, maybe I won't. Raise your hand and say, hey, how can I help? Maybe one can do a detail. Know that there are, oftentimes family considerations. It's not so easy to move. And even during COVID now, it's even hard to think about that. But be ready to jump in, ask how I can help. There are many ways to help. It might be taking on some projects. It might be some quality initiatives. It might be program evaluation. It might involve, moving somewhere temporarily, but not always. So those are things I would say, listen carefully for, and raise your hand. Don't be bashful about raising your hand, because there are more than enough projects, important things that we don't get to because the urgencies of the day get in the way. And I think that people will be grateful. To answer the question in the chat about positions at the network or national level, and whether you have to have experience on various committees. It's certainly not required. But if you think about the performance-based interviewing questions that are going to be asked, people are thinking about, they're trying to translate the work that you currently do in your current job, and what does it say about the work that you will do? They're projecting, just like they're projecting a college athlete in the NFL draft, or somebody, or when we're hiring somebody new. They have all this good experience, they've demonstrated success in their current role. Will they project to the next level? And it's a little harder to do if somebody hasn't done any work in that area. So it isn't that you can't get those jobs, you certainly can, but you have to think about your application, putting the ECQs, the executive core qualifications, together in your cover letters. Think about answering the questions on the PBIs if you get to an interview, about what are the ways in which you can take the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have and translate that to future action. And so those are my thoughts about that.
And hey, everybody, it's Gail. I've got a tack on to what Chris and Jay just said, and then somebody also posted a follow-up question. But in addition to what you both talked about, I think the thing to think about is that as you volunteer to participate on a project, make sure that you're an active participant and do a good job, because if you're on a project and you don't really contribute, people are going to be aware of that, and that will likely result in difficulty being asked to participate on future projects. So make sure it's something that you're interested in. Make sure that you have something to contribute, because there are lots of folks who say that they want to be more involved at the VISN and national level. And oh goodness, sorry about that. The FedEx guy must have just arrived. Anyway, so make sure that you actually contribute to those projects. Okay. So the question to Drs. Watson and Cohen: when detailed to a higher graded position, like what you just described, Jay, should that come with a temporary promotion?
So I'm going to take a stab at answering this question. I think in most cases, I'm going to go by my example. So I will say, make sure that you check into that and get sort of an HR response from that as well. In most cases, it should. However, I would recommend that you not do that for that purpose only. So I want to link a few things back to really what you said previously, Gail. You need to make sure that you do a good job, but you also need to recognize that when you're doing stretch assignments, they will stretch you out of 40 hours, and they will stretch you out in sometimes in terms of getting remuneration for all of what you do. So be aware that you're going to be putting in extra. You will reap the dividends later sometimes, but if you're overly focused on that, that might work against you. So I think you want to make sure that you get things done in a fair way and an equitable way, but be careful about overplaying that card and then setting yourself up to be viewed, unfortunately, sometimes as an opportunist. So I just want to be transparent about that from my perspective.
Thank you all so much for your responses to that. I mean, this is, I think one of the great things about working for the VA is that we do have so many opportunities that are presented to us. But then often, we do have to kind of balance, what can be kind of like what Dr. Watson was talking about, what is the stretch opportunity to make sure that it actually fits. And I really appreciated, I'm so sorry, that's above me. But I also really appreciated that then when we do take on those opportunities to make sure that we are actually meeting the needs of that opportunity. So I agree completely with that. I like to kind of think about some of these stretch opportunities as an investment in ourselves. And, you know, again, I'm such a fan of the VA. I could talk about it a lot, but just, you know, we have these opportunities to really stretch in our profession within the VA. So, okay, so this actually kind of goes into the next question that we had, which was, you know, actually, this is for any of you about strategies to kind of help with burnout prevention for mid-career. And again, and the question itself, just saying maybe beyond kind of the typical self-care, but just some maybe prevention possibilities.
So this is Jay. I'll start. And this is a good one. I mean, they're all great questions, but this one's just a personal one. It's I almost feel like I can't go without mentioning the self-care pieces because that's part of the puzzle. I mean, at the end of the day, my work is very important to me, as it is, I'm sure, for everyone. And to a certain extent, it is an identity for me, and it does partially define who I am. But it's not the whole of who I am. And it's really important for me to not get kind of lost in that. You know, I had a good day at work. Somebody said, you're doing a great job. Yay. And I had a bad day at work. My boss, you know, criticized me. Then I had a bad day. You know, there's many other parts to my day that matter. And I think that's really important. The same way that we talk with veterans about, you know, being, you know, recovery-oriented care and veteran-centered care, and that it's not the illness that defines them. It's not the symptoms, you know, that they're a whole person. I think we have to keep and maintain that. So I know, Charlotte, that you want us to focus on the other, but I have to share a couple of things that I use. I think one is cultivate a healthy group of good friends. It's really important to have them, both those that are within the VA so that you can vent and they understand what you're talking about, and as well as people outside the VA so you don't get too myopic and just, you know, lose sight of why we are here and do what we do. I think it's important to maintain hobbies that exercise brain muscles that we don't use at work. You know, we spend a lot of time analyzing, reading, doing data analysis, treatment therapy, et cetera, staring at computer screens, especially now in telework. It's really important to find other things to do to challenge yourself in other ways. Don't forget to exercise in any way, shape, or form. Got to do it. Find ways to laugh. I love to laugh. Sometimes I laugh too hard and it hurts, but really find ways to laugh. And if you can't find ways to laugh, then find the people that you want to hang out with that are going to help you laugh. And spend more time with those I love, and spend less time with those I don't. And so that's why Chris and Gail get so much time with me. So now regarding the careers, we come to VA, or we stay in VA because the mission is so clear. You know, we're here to serve and to honor veterans that deserve the best, and we want to provide them the best. And it's easy to get up every morning. Well, maybe not every morning, but most mornings it's easy to wake up and say, okay, I know why I'm going to work, and I know what I'm trying to accomplish and who I'm trying to do the work with. But in addition to that, there are other benefits to working in VA. And one of them we've talked about earlier, and Charlotte, you sort of alluded to this, is that you can spend an entire career in VA and have 20 different mini careers. You can be a frontline provider, you can be a team lead, can run a clinic, can be a researcher, can get involved in policy, can leave the mental health team altogether and go over to quality, and can do systems redesign work, high reliability organization work, can decide to go follow the director route and MBA style work, you know, and so on. So what I would suggest is every couple of years, think about what it is, where can I grow? And, you know, you're talking about this, about stretching oneself, investing in oneself. Where can I grow? Am I getting stale? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? And instead of having to change careers and leave the organization and mess up my retirement and all that, I can look around at VA and say, what else can I do? Where else can I contribute? And be willing to try to learn new skills and adopt new roles. And I know that was kind of long-winded, but I'm kind of passionate about this one. And Chris, what say you?
I love it, Jay. I am similarly very passionate about this as well. And I really like what you talked about in terms of self-care, because that's a big piece. And no matter how good we do that, we can do that better. So I will say I'm a big champion of being a generalist. So that's how I was trained. And I have this conversation often. So I'm going to ask for Jay and Charlotte to cut me off because it's very easy for me to go there with this one. So I will tell you specifically, a big thing that I have now, a big pet peeve I have is psychologists who say, you know, well, I don't really know how to do couples therapy or marital therapy. That's beyond my competence. And I was like, well, I don't remember being asked about that when I came to the VA. I started off on an inpatient unit and I was expected to do pretty much everything except for neuropsych, because I was a neuropsychologist, and some super specialty SUD care. But I still had to treat veterans who had SUD issues. I still had to handle family and couples issues as needed. And I want to go back to what Jay is saying about every few years, dust yourself off, intentionally learn something that's a little bit outside of what you would normally like to do. Try to reinvent yourself. I think that's what makes us competitive. I truly think as psychologists, just how we're trained, we are very chameleon-like. We can do a lot. That's why we have so much to offer any healthcare system, whether it's VA or not. Really stretch yourself and do some different things. It's easy to get just into doing one thing over and over. And I think that's a recipe for burnout. It's my belief there are very few psychologists, I've met a few across my career, that can sustain a career in doing trauma work and SUD work only. I think that's just, it's very exhausting. And it's really good to flex yourself and to learn new skills, to stay marketable, to try new things, some things you may like, some that you may not. But that is my answer. That's my story. And as I like to say, that's what I'm sticking with.
Well, I really appreciate both of your responses, and I also resonate very strongly with both of the things that you both said. And yeah, I think that there's ways that we can continue to keep stretching ourselves. I was actually given advice by a person who retired from the VA after 43 years, and you know, just truly somebody who I really looked up to and still continue to think of very fondly. And they suggested to me that about every 3 to 5 years, really be thinking about what your next step is, or even make another step within the VA, because we can do that in the VA. And then we continue to keep having fresh careers. I can't remember now if it was Dr. Cohen or Dr. Watson that said, you know, we can kind of have these mini careers within the VA, which is very true. And also one of the reasons what makes a VA career just so rich and rewarding. So that actually kind of naturally goes really well into the next question that we have from our mid-career psychologists. It says, how can mid-career psychologists advocate for time to pursue and utilize skills that don't normally fall under a clinical job description? Dr. Watson, I think you talked about this a little bit about, like, you know, volunteering, you know, if you saw like maybe a project that maybe it has some need, but would love to hear from both of you, maybe in the areas of program development or research, or maybe even serving on committees in the hospital or something beyond that.
Sure. I will say to start off, I'm a little bit of a rebel on this. So you do things first with your own time, and then as it becomes important for other people, then you highlight that you're doing it, and then you ask for time from there. So you can say, this is what I've done with it. This is what I've done. You don't always have to say that you did this on just extra time that for yourself, but it's more like a product. Here, I've done this. This is something I'm really interested in. It ties to our core values or other VA initiatives in this way. So this is how it's not only important to me, but it's important to you as a supervisor. So I'm helping you look good and shine as well. And now I'd like to maybe, since I've already done a pilot in a way, I like to do a little bit more with this. So, is there a possibility that I could have this amount of time to do that? So you always ask the question, be prepared that the answer may be no, and depending on how important this is to you, you may need to continue using some of your time until it becomes in vogue and fashionable. So that's my rebel perspective. Over to you, Jay.
Thanks, Chris. And I don't know how much of a rebel perspective it is. I think that we all have to make choices, and everything is about a trade-off. And sometimes if I want others to invest in me, I have to invest in myself, and I have to put things in on the front end that may or may not pan out. And so hopefully I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I can then encourage or convince others in the organization to support that. So I would say, yes, sometimes in order to advocate for the time, if I'm going to ask, and this gets back to the conversation we had earlier about how do I convince somebody else that investing in me is worth it? Well, have I demonstrated that I'm willing to invest in myself? Where's the time that I'm taking out of my own personal time to work on these projects? How is that important to me? And I'm not saying everyone has to go, no one should feel guilty about going beyond your 40 hours. You put in your honest day's work and your 40 hours and you've earned that right to go home. But sometimes if you want others to protect time for you, they might say, well, how important is this to you? So that's just one thought. The other is, I think about ROI, return on investment, going beyond the traditional cost and resource benefit. And Chris, you mentioned this earlier too. So I'm asking for protected time, let's say from my panel or my productivity targets, or so that I can pursue professional development X. It could be I want to start a new program and I need the time to do the research, develop the materials. So I'm asking my supervisor and or leadership to block and support that time, because I'm going to turn around and benefit the organization by bringing a new clinical practice here, a new evidence-based practice, and innovation, publications, research. So I think any of those, it's really about selling. What's the return on investment? And again, what's in it for them? How am I going to benefit the organization with this additional time? More formally, there are career awards that one can apply for that do a buy out one's time, and it's not always for research. It's frequently for research. Think about K awards and things like that. But one can also do it for starting a new skill, and it's a little bit more challenging. You have to do your own research on this. I haven't been in this area in a while, so please don't ask any follow-ups. I'll just encourage you to poke around and look for them. And then finally, applying for leadership development programs. There are many leadership development programs, just the ones at the facility that are usually, I'd say probably for a GS-13 and above psychologist may or may not be appropriate for you, but then there's the ones at the VISN. There are many of them at the national level. And if you are able to get into any of these leadership programs, and I'd encourage you to start with the VISN lead, even though in many cases you might say, I know that stuff already. I know how to do a 360 and I know how to do all the emotional intelligence stuff that they're doing. Do it anyway. You'll still learn a lot about yourself. You'll still be part of a cohort where you'll be building relationships and networking. And it's okay to have some humility and be willing to learn from others that are not psychologists. They may have something to offer. So do it anyway. And when you do those things, there is time that is protected for projects that are required in the leadership development program. And that's time that you can use to do some really interesting and cool things. And so I'll stop with my talking points there. And Chris, back to you.
Those are good points, Jay. And for the full circle moment, sometimes when you have done a stretch opportunity and done it well, on occasion, people will come to you and say, we need something extra, and give you time to do it.
Mhm.
So sometimes it really pays in spades for you. So it really is about sort of, what are you doing? Know that other people are watching, and how is it linked to priorities for the organization, including your supervisor and your supervisor's supervisor.
I just appreciate from both of you, again, just this kind of this encouragement of investment into self with all of this. And, you know, and thank you again for kind of reminding us about some of those leadership opportunities that sometimes we kind of forget about doing. And I really appreciated the advice, or the suggestion of thinking about the ones, even the leadership opportunities, the LEAD program, because again, we could end up kind of finding maybe something in that could really stretch us as mid-career. For a final question, and I know we're really close on time, and I know that this is not a question we should ask with only a few minutes left, but I'm going to try to get it in, is, you know, just again, kind of thinking about mid-career and just how dynamic and wonderful we are, but then how do we recruit and retain diverse mid-career staff, specifically psychologists? So any suggestions or thoughts on that?
Oh, I have tons of.
Yes, start. Go for it, Chris.
Okay, Jay. Okay, so first of all, I really believe in the principle of intentionality. So it's not going to happen unless that's something that you truly want and desire. And things that we truly want and desire, we actually spend time doing. So I think we all have to have a reality check with ourselves. You know, what are you wanting to do? And then what have you done in that direction? And then I also think, just like we work on motivational interviewing, be careful what you wish for. Are you ready for a more diverse staff? Because a more diverse staff, which looks good and it sounds good, and it might be the PC thing to do, means that you'll be getting some feedback that you haven't received before. And are you ready for that feedback? Where people are going to say, well, hey, what about looking at it from this perspective? Or how is it affecting this segment of veterans? Or how does this affect how we make some of our decisions? Some areas and some people are not ready for that. So it's okay if you acknowledge that you're not ready for that, and then say, what do I need to do to prepare for that? So I want to throw out those big pieces first, because I think they really matter. You want to make sure that you're doing things from start to finish. You know, where are you connecting with people? Are you getting your information out to other listservs where there are diverse psychologists there? If you're not, then you have to question your intentionality and your reason behind it. Are you involving people on panels and in first reviews, paper reviews, panels? Do you have performance-based interview questions that talk about diversity? Do you have a setting or system that, again, is ready to deal with that? You know, these are things I could talk more on specifics, but you need to do these parts first because they lead you to the next steps.
This is Jay. I'll just add to that. I don't know really how much I can add to that, Chris, but I would say that there's a ton of work being done in this space in recently in the last few months, and it's really ramped up in a good way, and intentionality is an important piece of that. The other piece of that to me is about creating an inclusive environment. And so, you know, we can set targets for increasing diversity, but if we haven't created a culture that values an inclusive environment, then we're not going to retain those individuals that we're trying to increase, and we're going to lose the few that we have. And so I would encourage us to, use as best we can some of the basic skills that we have as healthcare professionals and mental health care professionals, but that's not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient. It's important to be humble, recognize what we don't know, and that at times our best efforts are actually counterproductive because they reinforce certain habits that we're trying to break, and be open to hearing from staff and trying to create the psychological safety that's necessary to really learn about what it is that we need to do to change the status quo. And having a commitment to wanting to change the status quo, having an openness and a willingness to do it, leading and modeling by example, and having that intentionality that this is not just a fad. It's not we're just not responding to particular pressures that are out there now, but we're committed to this. Then you have a shot at least at making a difference, and recruiting, retaining staff, and especially those folks. I'll just end with one little thing that I think every organization, it's really important for every organization to have a mission statement, mission value statement. It's very easy to, get those and write them up and put them on a wall and then not practice them. They don't mean anything. But if you do it right, you basically say every decision that we make, let's go back, and we're not sure what to do. You can go down path A or path B. Let's go back to our mission and vision statement and say, how is this decision consistent with those core values? And I think the same thing applies to an individual. I know we skipped over one question about leadership positions that are not necessarily supervisory. And my comment was going to be that leadership's a state of mind and not a position. And I think here it's the same thing. Every single person on this call is a leader, and every single person on this call is a mini corporation. And so think about what are your values, and what are the things that drive you, and are you consistent with them? Do other people know what they are? And I don't mind sharing mine here. I have it on my CV. I talk about it in staff meetings, and I ask my staff to hold me accountable to these. And when I've failed or let them down or let myself down, then let's talk about it. And my three happen to be, and you'll have to come up with your own three. Can't steal mine. You got to come up with your own. Are be genuine, have a vision for excellence, and believe in your team. And so think about what yours are, and how important it is to you to recruit, retain diverse staff, to create a culture of inclusivity, and other pieces to the puzzle will follow. And those are my, again, long-winded thoughts, but it's the end of the day, so I decided to go long-winded. Back. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Chris or Charlotte. You want to wrap us up, take us home, but I'll stop you.
Hey, it's Gail. Can I interject real quick? Because
Of course.
with a question that we have in the Q&A about, what if we ourselves have the ability to, take on extra work, but we have other colleagues who have so much potential and could be amazing, but they don't have the extra hours to give. And I think both you, Jay, and Chris sort of touched on this, that if we truly do value equity and inclusion, then it's up to us to figure out how to support, honor, and recognize those colleagues of ours who are working really hard, and who might not have access to as many opportunities. So, an example of this is, how many awards or recognitions have you nominated your very hardworking colleagues who have potential? How many nominations have you submitted to various recognitions, awards, and things like that? I think there are certain behaviors that we can engage in that can demonstrate our inclusivity, the way that you both described. All right, Charlotte, back to you. We've got 3 minutes to go, and people probably have 4 p.m.
Absolutely.
meeting, so I didn't know if you wanted to wrap this up.
Absolutely. I just wanted to give Dr. Watson an opportunity to say any closing statements as well.
Oh, thanks. Well, I could say tons of things about diversity, but I will say thank you for the invitation for this particular sort of expression and collective to talk to mid-career psychologists. I'm a strong believer in psychology and in VA psychology and the career it's afforded me. And I know that people have to make sacrifices, including just being on this call itself. So I appreciate and applaud the sacrifices that people make. And I hope that whatever that you do, that you will continue, you will finish out your careers in VA. We need you, I need you. I don't know how more plain to make that be, that we need you there. And it's not just for you, but it's for the next generations to follow.
Absolutely. And so just kind of closing with this is the point and purpose of us doing these initiatives is to hopefully create networks so we can support each other in the work that we're doing and ultimately serve the veterans that we serve even better. So if you are on this webinar, maybe hearing about this for the first time and would like to reach out to me, please do. I will tell you more about the initiatives that we're undertaking. And now you know 3 of our leaders that I'm sure would also be open to taking your questions as well. But just really want to appreciate and honor and be very grateful for the time that everyone has spent, our panelists, our hosts, and then also each of you. And that's what I've got.
All right, thanks everyone. This webinar will be posted on the Division 18 VA section website in a few days. Thanks all for coming. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.